The tribe says, hit the like. Audit them says, thumb activated. Must be 2001 says, Oakland love. Debonair says, is it 9:30 there?
Greetings and welcome to Property, Part 2, condensed from American jurisprudence. Before we get started, to remind everyone that this is strictly for the educational entertainment purposes of this YouTube channel and broadcast, not to be used, misconstrued, or abused for anything legal, lawful, private, public, personal, business, tax, financial, or otherwise, so please don't do this at home. That said, let's get started. So we're going over American Jurisprudence, 2nd edition, volume 63C, which has property law. And we're going over the final sections now, 24 through 41, which goes over acquisition, title and color of title, incidents of ownership, possession, limitations on use, alienation, and transfer. So, a lot to get in here. Let's get started. So, starting with section 24, the acquisition of property. So the lawful means of acquisition, unlike the unlawful means like theft. So by descent and purchase, so inherited from ancestors or obtained through sale and common commercial transactions. That's one lawful mean of acquiring property. Another is by transfer or conveyance via device from a descendant's estate, deeds, gifts, or other valid transfers of title. Again, we have here valid transfers to be a lawful means of acquiring property. And there's by natural causes through accretion for real property or increase of animals for personal property. So, of course, natural causes is breeding. That creates extra property, and that's a lawful means of acquiring property. So breeders. And by incorporation union, personal property acquired by merging with or joining to other existing property. And this could be both tangible and intangible. The key rule is trespass cannot form the basis for acquiring title. So, like we have possession, but if it's an unlawful possession or trespass or anything of that nature, it cannot form the basis for the acquisition of your title. And that's in the lawful acquiring of property. Let's go on to section 25 and let's look at this title here. Title is the evidence, the evidence of a person's right or extent of interest, the means whereby the owner maintains or asserts possession and enjoyment. So these are essentials of property ownership: is possession, enjoyment, disposal, exclusion. The title is simply evidence of the right. The rights are both, with the tangible property and the intangible rights associated with it, like being able to have it passed on to descendants. That's the title only gives evidence that exists. So it can be seen as a rebuttable presumption depending on the degree of that title. And public policy favors certainty in title. It must always be vested in someone. This is another key thing here, is that the title must be vested in someone. Legal title may be held only by a natural person or a legally recognized entity. Nonetheless, they can't be abandoned or floating around, otherwise it won't be a legal title. So here's some key distinctions. Legal title evidences apparent ownership, but does not necessarily signify full and complete title or beneficial interest. Then there's color of title. It gives a semblance or appearance of title, but it is not title in fact. A claim with apparent validity that is, in reality, defective. We say defective meaning in the legal sense. Then there's equitable title. That's the right to have legal title transferred upon the performance of a specified condition. And then there's title versus ownership. They're not synonymous. This gets to be a confusing issue here. Ownership is but one element of title. Title refers only to a legal relationship to land. So title is the legal relationship to land. Ownership is but one element. All right, let's move along. Let's look over section 26, the owner and ownership. Ownership, like a ship or a boat, is a collection of rights to possess, to use, and to enjoy property, including the right to sell and transmit it. So this is a bundle of rights, and we see that as ownership is a collection of rights to possess, use, and enjoy property, including the right to sell and transmit it. This comes down to intangible property here. There's a legal title holder. The plain meaning of owner contemplates someone with legal or rightful title. When used alone, owner imports absolute ownership, complete dominion, and plenary control. Now there's a flexible meaning too. The term owner includes one having an interest other than full legal and beneficial title. So in the legal title holder meaning, we have owner, the plain meaning of owner, someone with legal or rightful title. But in the flexible meaning here, it includes having an interest other than full legal and beneficial title. It may range from absolute proprietary interest to a mere possessory right, including tenants for years, tenants for life, and remaindermen. And then there's the de facto ownership. De facto ownership may exist without physical possession, where there is a sufficient degree of possession, control, dominion, or supervision. The state's power to regulate does not constitute ownership. So again, just paying taxes is not evidence of a de facto ownership. And the note we have here is the owner who bears the loss in case of property destruction is the true owner, including one who holds only equitable title. That's interesting there. All right, let's move along. And let's look at the incidence of ownership here from section 27. And before we go further, just to remind everyone that we do have the talking chat enabled here. So if you like some questions, comments, clarities, or feedback, Go ahead, pipe up in the chat.
The tribe says, hit the like.
And it will read it back. And then we can address it right here before we move on. Let's continue. The primary incidents of ownership include the right to possession, use, and enjoyment, the right to change or improve, and the right to alienate the property at will. So let's look at these. You have the right to possess, ownership. We're looking at incidents of ownership, implies the right of possession and control over the property. 2, use and enjoyment. These are another incident here. The right to use and enjoy property in any lawful manner the owner may choose. Any lawful manner. 3, the right to improve, the right to change or improve the property, including structures and land use. Now, improve has a bit of a subjective connotations to it as well, but I'll leave that for the audience. And then 4, the right to alienate. This is the right to sell, convey, devise, or otherwise transfer property at will. Of course, number 5, the right to exclude. A true owner has full dominion and the right to expel intruders from the property. And 6, the right to products. Ownership carries the right to its products or increase above and below the surface. So trees growing on land, mineral rights, I guess solar power too, huh? All right, here we go. Sections 28 to 30, possession. There's actual possession and constructive possession. So actual possession, the definition is actual, open, visible possession or occupancy. In fact, so that's a real demonstrative act, pedis possessio, or the foothold on the land. Pedis possessio, or the foothold on the land. Oh, okay, I get it. So requirements here: physical occupation of land, actual and continuous occupancy, exercise of full dominion. And we get over this in, I think we have another one about adverse possession and such, where some of these terms are actually a little bit more brought into detail and explained better too. Actual and continuous occupancy doesn't mean you have to be there every minute of every day, but it has to just show that intent of having that occupancy and the physical occupation of land for most of the time, at least enough to exercise that full dominion. The effect is it constitutes notice to the world. So it's going to be notorious. This actual possession constitutes notice to the world of whatever rights the possessor may have in the property. Not just the city, but to the world. So that's what actual possession constitutes, notice to the world of whatever rights the possessor may have in the property. But now we get to constructive possession. That's the possession without actual personal occupation, with intent and capability to maintain control and dominion. So you have the intent and capability, but not actually possessing continuous occupancy, physical occupation, none of those. So there's only 2 elements required: an intent to maintain dominion and control instead of an exercise, and 2, the capability to maintain dominion and control. So this is very related to the potential, and this is the actual doing of such, the exercise. The note for constructive possession: it need not be exclusive. It may be shared. The holder of valid deed impliedly has constructive possession, even if the land's vacant. Oh, interesting there. So vacant land and holder of the deed. Okay. Makes sense? Because at some point, there could be a house there. All right, let's go over sections 31 and 33 here, and the limitations on the use of property. And make sure everyone, I want everyone to know that stay to the end. There's going to be a very extra special treat. So you need to make sure, and we're almost done. This is a very short presentation because we went through the meat of it in part 1. So let's look at these limitations. Well, every landowner has a right to use and enjoy property as they see fit. Such use must be reasonable and must not cause unnecessary harm to or invade the rights of others. Reasonable is the key word here, and cause unnecessary harm or invade the rights of others. Free use is favored. Public policy favors the free and unencumbered use of property. Doubts about use should be resolved in favor of free use. Restrictions must be strictly construed against the party seeking to enforce them. And there's police power, though. The state may regulate property use to secure general safety, public welfare, and good order. All property is presumed within the state's police power, consistent with constitutional limitations. So, that's that check right there. That's all you get on the state's power. Then there's the right to lawful use. Every person owning property has the right to make any lawful use of it as he or she sees fit. Arbitrary, capricious, or oppressive restrictions will not be permitted. And there's the governmental taking, where regulation completely deprives the owner of all economically beneficial use. The government must pay just compensation, except where background principles of nuisance law apply. So background principles, I guess if you have a toxic waste dump there, then there might be some governmental taking there outside of a just compensation. Other than that, there's the eminent domain. Then there's a community obligation. The property is held under the implied obligation that the owner will use it so as not to be injurious to the community. An owner will not be permitted to use the property solely to damage a neighbor. So that's a limitation on use of property. And the vertical extent of rights. Ownership theoretically extends indefinitely downward to the center of the earth and upward to the sky. Such rights can be modified only by legislation through police power or eminent domain. So the bridge over your house. Let's get on to the alienation and transfer here, sections 35 and 36. Alienation is the complete, voluntary transfer of title, generally implying a sale, and also encompassing the power of disposition by will. So, let's break this down. It's one of the most important rights incident to ownership. So, possession's nice, but to own it allows alienation and transfer or sale. Law favors the free alienability of property interests. Any condition unduly restraining alienation of fee title, that's the land title in land, is invalid. So the fee, typically it's a freehold, I believe, title in land is what they're referring to here. Any condition that's unduly restraining the alienation, so that means a sale, generally is what we're talking about here, is invalid. So conditions that prevent. So I guess this would fall probably into unlawful liens and such. But I'm not too sure. You'd have to check with your jurisdiction. And then there's reasonable restraints justified by legitimate interests, and they're not necessarily void. One who does not hold title cannot pass or transfer title to another. So let's look at that form and mode of transfer. There's a comprehensive scope. Transfer includes every means and manner by which property can pass from the ownership and possession of one person to another. That's transfer. Includes every means and manner by which it can pass. Then there's the lifetime versus inheritance. Disposition of property during one's lifetime is a natural right. The right to control disposition after death and the right of inheritance are statutory. Wow. The writing requirement to transfer an ownership interest in real property. So we're talking about certain rights, right, to transfer an ownership interest in real property, generally, which again is presumptive here, there could be exceptions, generally requires a deed or other written conveyance, although some authority allows conveyance in non-formal documents. What are non-formal? Typically anything that doesn't come with a standard form for public use. So any variance from that would be a non-formal, not that it's not legitimate, it's just not from a standard form. And then there's the divestiture on transfer. Prior owners are divested of all rights and obligations to property on the date that the title transfers to new owners, absent a contrary agreement. And as we covered on part 1, manure and things like that could be part of that agreement. Let's move along. There we go. Sections 39 to 41, burden of proof and presumptions. And this is probably one of the best slides here, so let's dig in deep on this. This is where it gets the parts that few people really pay attention to. The proof and burden of ownership here. We have an evidence hierarchy. Okay, this is a hierarchy going from the strongest to the weakest. The strongest is the record and legal title. It's not easily defeated. Then we go down to just strong, which is a valid deed with delivery and continuous control. And that's strong, but not as strong as a legal title. Then there's the moderate, the certificate of title, which is prima facie and rebuttable. And then there's limited proof here, which is like the possession alone, the lowest evidence of ownership. So for possession to be enough with color of title and adverse possession with a notorious continuous occupation, yeah, it's quite limited, but if all that can be met, then it can be evidence of ownership. So let's look at the burden of proof and presumptions here. We have burden on the claimant. The burden of proving title or ownership of real property. Now we're talking about tangible, immovable, real property. Is upon the party alleging it. The burden rebutting a prima facie showing rests on the party attacking the title shown. So the burden's on the claimant. Whoever the burden of proving title or ownership is upon the party alleging it. So whoever is alleging they own it, the burden of proof is on them. The burden of rebutting, now here's rebutting the prima facie showing rests on the party attacking the title shown. Title. Okay, let's get to the presumption from possession. Oh boy, a rebuttable presumption exists that those in possession of property are rightly in possession. The law ever presumes ownership in favor of possession. This presumption gives way to evidence of superior title. So again, that's the strongest, the record title, not easily defeated. So the presumption from possession is it gives way to a superior title. Now we get form of title presumption. The description in a deed as to how the title is held is presumed to reflect actual ownership interests. There's a presumption. The party asserting otherwise must prove it by clear and convincing evidence, not merely by tracing funds used. So, common pitfall is looking at just the funds used. Although that is important evidence, it must be proven by clear and convincing, so it can't just simply be inferred by fragments of evidence. So the form of title presumption, this is an important one right here. Again, it's how the title is presumed to reflect ownership interest. And again, it's that chain of title ownership is important. All right, now we get down to the Easter egg here with motor vehicle certificates. A certificate of title is prima facie, but not conclusive evidence of ownership. It is subject to rebuttal by other evidence demonstrating that a different individual owns the vehicle in question. Because a certificate is not a title, it's a certificate of title. As we see here, moderate on this hierarchy. So the actual legal title is not the certificate of title. A certificate of title is prima facie, but not conclusive, evidence of ownership. And it is subject to rebuttal by other evidence demonstrating that a different individual owns the vehicle in question. This is not clear and convincing. This is by other evidence. So you see here, as we get down to the low burdens of proof here, it's much easier to defeat. But this is an interesting one here, and you could take it to its logical conclusion. But now let's look over these key principles we went over and do it at a glance before we get on to the best part of the presentation. Acquisition. Property may be lawfully acquired by purchase, descent, conveyance, natural causes like births of your livestock, or incorporation, but never by trespass. So again, by piracy, it's never owned. Perhaps conquered by war, but not by trespass. Then there's title. It must always be vested, meaning there's someone has to be the one that owns the title or holds the title. It cannot remain in abeyance. Legal, equitable, and color of title carry distinct legal effects. We see there are different varying levels of evidence, some more easily defeated than others. And finally, we have ownership. It's a bundle of rights, including possession, use, enjoyment, improvement, exclusion, alienation, and receipt of products, meaning the livestock, births, minerals, etc. Then we have possession, the prima facie evidence of ownership, actual or constructive, as we saw there, but yields to evidence of superior title. So possession is important, but superior title is the one that defeats it. Then there's use, favored, free, and unencumbered, but subject to community obligation and not to injure others. And it's also subject, though, to state police power. Then there's alienation, one of the most fundamental incidents of ownership. Law strongly favors the free transferability of property interest. So one of the reasons for deeds is to make that easier, just so we know the status of a title. But it's again, it comes with its own encumbrances, so to speak. And then there's the burden of proof. It rests on the claimant. Possession raises a rebuttable presumption. Record title, though, is the highest evidence. All right, that takes us to the best part. We get on to the fun quiz here, and let's explain how we play this game here. In the chat, you put in the number of the question, followed by the letter of the answer you choose. So if question 1 here, I was going to choose letter D, I would go in with Arabic number 1, followed by the letter D delta in the chat, and that would be my answer. If I decided I need to change it, I would just put that same question number in again, followed by my changed choice, and that would be the final choice and the final answer. We'll tally up at the end and test our knowledge. Let's get started. Question 1. A developer has occupied a vacant lot for years, erecting fences and maintaining the land, but he entered without any permission or legal basis. Under American jurisprudence, which statement is most accurate regarding the developer's claim to title? A. Continuous occupation and improvement of the land creates a strong presumption of title, like a color of title. B. Trespass cannot form the basis for the acquisition of title, regardless of duration or improvement. C. Fencing and maintaining the land constitutes actual possession sufficient to vest title. And D. The developer acquires constructive possession once the land is improved, which matures into title. So, as we see here, we got 4 choices. Let's see which ones make the most sense, because we're looking at the one that's most accurate. Some are very not accurate, but anyone who wants to take a
Joseph
stab.
figure 5227 says 1B.
All right, welcome, Joseph.
Debonaridad says 1B.
In divine rights. I know why I can't read that right. Excellent. So we got B. Any other takers for question 1? Let's move on to question 2. Question 2, title versus ownership. Marcus holds a deed to a parcel of land. His neighbor, Elena, claims she is the true owner because she paid for the property. Under the form of title presumption, which of the following, standing alone, is insufficient to overcome the presumption that the deed reflects true ownership? So let's look at this. We're looking at that. There's no other evidence except this. Which piece standing alone is insufficient to overcome the presumption that the deed reflects true ownership? So Marcus is holding a deed to a partial, but Elena claims she's a true owner because she paid for it. So which of the following, standing alone, is insufficient to overcome Marcus's deed? A, evidence of an agreement between the parties that the deed does not reflect their intent. B, an understanding between the parties that the title was held differently than intended. C, testimony that the title was taken in a particular form merely to obtain a loan. Or D, clear and convincing evidence of a contrary agreement between the grantor and grantee. So we're challenging the deed, which alone is insufficient to overcome the presumption that the deed reflects true ownership.
Joseph figure 5227 says 2D.
Okay, so we have a D here, that the clear and convincing, which of the following, standing alone, is insufficient to overcome the presumption. Just to make sure getting that right. I know it sounds like a double negative kind of thing here, but which of these standing alone is insufficient to overcome the presumption that Marcus holds a valid deed? Is it that what they had, Elena, she has evidence of an agreement between the parties that the deed does not reflect their intent? Would that alone be sufficient? An understanding between the parties that the title was held differently than intended? Would that alone overcome the deed? C, testimony that the title was taken in a particular form.
Debonaridad says 2B.
Okay, so we have B here. Now, again, we're looking for something that is insufficient. So you're saying that B would be insufficient to overcome the deed, just to be clear, because it sounds confusing, like we're looking for the right one, but most of these would be sufficient, but one of these alone is insufficient. So which one is insufficient to overcome the presumption? So we have testimony the title was taken in a particular form merely to obtain a loan, or clear and convincing evidence of a contrary agreement between the grantor and grantee. We're looking for the insufficient one. One of these is insufficient to overcome the presumption the deed reflects true ownership. So which of these is insufficient? About the true intent, an understanding it was held differently than intended, testimony was taken merely to obtain a loan, or D, clear and convincing evidence. So which of these is insufficient? Give you guys one more chance if you want to change your answers, or we're going to stick with it. Going once, going twice, going 3 times to question 3. Possession. Priya sells a vintage piano sitting in her garage to David. David pays in full, but he has not picked it up yet. Priya later refuses to let David enter her property to retrieve it. Ooh. Under property law, which best describes David's legal position? A, David has no right to enter Priya's land. Physical delivery is required to complete the sale. B, David has an implied, irrevocable license to enter and remove the piano, coupled with his valid title. C, Priya retains constructive possession of the piano until David physically removes it. Or D, David's only remedy is a damages action. He cannot compel access to Priya's property. So which best describes David's legal position? He wants that piano. He paid for it in full. But Priya says, no, you can't come and get it. So which one here? We're not.
Joseph figure 5227 says 3D.
All right, Joseph says 3D. That David's only remedy is a damages action because he cannot compel access to Priya's property. Any other stabs for question 3? Going once, going twice, going 3 times, going on to question 4. All right, 4 is limitations on use in police power.
Captain Eridaz says 3D.
Okay, we have 3D, 2 for 3D, excellent. All right, now we're on to the limitations on use in police power. A city ordinance entirely eliminates all economically beneficial use of a landowner's waterfront property in the name of environmental protection. The landowner sues for compensation. Which statement best reflects the governing legal principle? A. Police power is unlimited. No compensation is owed for any land use regulation. B. Compensation is owed only if the landowner can prove the regulation was arbitrary and capricious. C. Where regulation completely deprives all economically beneficial use, the government must pay just compensation, unless background principles of nuisance law independently restrict that use. Or D, the landowner's rights extend indefinitely above and below the surface, making any restriction unconstitutional. So, the city ordinance eliminates all economically beneficial use of a landowner's waterfront property. So let's say he has a waterfront restaurant there or whatever, and now it's being deprived of all that economically beneficial use in the name of environmental protection. The landowner sues for compensation. So which statement best reflects the governing legal principle? So he's suing. What's the guiding principle the judge is going to have to rule on? Is it, well, the police power is unlimited, you get no compensation for any regulations. Or B, the compensation is owed only if the landowner can prove the regulation was arbitrary and capricious. Or is it C, where regulation completely deprives all economically beneficial use, the government must pay just compensation, unless background principles of nuisance law independently restrict that use. So they're saying environmental protection, but I'm not sure if he's doing anything bad. And then the landowner's rights extend indefinitely above and below the surface, making any restriction unconstitutional. He's a man on the land above and below the surface, so it'd be unconstitutional. All right, any takers for question 4? I'll give you guys a few more seconds to think about this one here. This one's pretty easy. It should be straightforward. All right, let's go on to the answer.
Captain Eridaz says 4D.
Yeah, 4D, all right. Let's go on to the answer key. All right, so for question 1, the acquisition of property. The correct answer is B. The trespass cannot form the basis for acquisition of title, regardless of duration or improvement. So trespass cannot form the basis for acquisition of title. No amount of occupation, fencing, or improvement converts trespass into title under that doctrine. So he didn't, it was not like a notorious occupation. He's a developer. He wasn't there to occupy the land in a possessory intent. Therefore, I guess whatever he was doing there is not considered that. Let's go back to that question, look at the exact reading on it, because I want to be sure. Let's see, that was the first one here. A vacant lot. So he occupied in maintaining the land, but entered without any permission or legal basis. Okay, so then, yeah, he didn't enter without, there was no abandonment or anything. There might have been no trespassing signs as well. All right. So I want to make sure I was clear on that question, but yes, indeed. Let's go on to question 2. The correct answer is C. This was the form of title presumption. The testimony that the title was taken in a particular form merely to obtain a loan. That is the one that's insufficient because the presumption cannot be overcome solely by tracing funds, nor by testimony of an intention not disclosed to the grantee. nor by evidence that title was taken in a particular manner merely to obtain a loan. So options A, B, and C each describe an agreement or understanding, the one category that can defeat the presumption of title. So there it is, that loan, the funds, tracing funds alone is not enough to defeat that title. All right, let's go to question 3. Personal property possession. The correct answer was B. David has an implied irrevocable license to enter and remove the piano coupled with his valid title. Section 3 provides if the owner of land sells personal property situated on his or her land, the vendee obtains an implied license to enter the premises and take possession. The license is coupled with and supported by a valid interest in or title in the property sold, and this cannot be revoked. All right, so he has the implied irrevocable license to enter and remove the piano when he bought it from that place. It's just the same as, I guess, if you went to harvest crops from somewhere, in that sense, that because the piano is there, he has a license for removal, which would give a temporary permission to enter the land. All right, so we're on to question 4, the governmental regulations and takings. Where a regulation completely deprives all economically beneficial use, the government must pay just compensation, unless background principles of nuisance law independently restrict that use. That's not a nuisance law, that was some code. So it states that this rule directly here, section 33. Option A is wrong because a police power has constitutional limits. Option B and D misstate the governing standard. So there it is. This was a pretty hard quiz. Hard on me too. And I just want to make it up to that level because property is one of those things that we rarely take into such a really deep look and a deep dive into the meaning of all the terms surrounding it and the actual actions that are needed to possess property, to be able to convey property, and have the other rights associated. As we see, property, when we speak of property in law, it's not about the property itself, but the rights associated with the property, the use, disposal, all of these different issues of property that are the rights in that bundle of rights that could be applied to both physical objects and intangibles, such as stock shares and other types of indications of ownership. And again, we have other aspects where you have fish ponds where they're breeding more and more fish, or cows or sheep. So you have a lot of different ways of creating property and acquiring it legally. So that said, I thank you all for attending on this one. This definitely was a deep dive into property, and it completes our survey here from American jurisprudence on the entire section of property. I hope you had fun on this one, and I hope to see you all on the next one. Peace out.